Welcome everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are talking about Metroid Prime 4, and this desperate wait for this game. I've kind of grown tired of just saying at the beginning of a whole bunch of Prime videos that, yeah, Metroid Prime 4 was announced back in summer of 2017, but its restart was announced back in January of 2019. Yes, it's been a long time, and there's been a lot of different things we've discussed lately that could be hinting at a reveal soon, and a release soon as well. And with the latest updates and reports and rumors, there's now a lot of talk about Prime 4 maybe being a part of the launch window for Switch 2, or a big holiday title for this year. There's a bit of a debate to be had there, and so we're not entirely sure what's going on. So with all the new information in mind, I would like to have a discussion on that. But before going forward, I would like to point out that we are aiming for a more shorter term goal now of 40,000 subscribers within the next few months here, so if you enjoy my perspectives and theories and my content, please subscribe and hit the notification bell, and enjoy the ride as we talk about Nintendo every day. So before I get into the really new information, let me discuss some of the things that have happened over the last couple weeks that have kind of changed the conversation a bit regarding Metroid Prime 4. So we've already seen evidence that Metroid Prime 4 has been in the QA testing stage since early last year, so likely the game is being prepped and is nearing completion. But there's also been this belief by many that Metroid Prime 4 will be a cross-gen game between Switch 1 and Switch 2. And what this means is that there will be two different versions. One version will be more geared for Switch 2, visual enhancements we would assume. And because this is such an ambitious game by Nintendo that's been developed for such a long time, fans are definitely looking forward to the most optimal version of the game. That said, Prime Mastered was a pretty spectacular game for Switch 1, and so using that same engine but updated a little bit more and made ground up for Switch, Metroid Prime 4 probably could still look pretty good on Switch 1. So both versions should be valuable. But a big part of this conversation came with the assumption that Switch 2 would be coming out sometime in the latter half of 2024, but with the most recent reports from Brazil and Bloomberg and Eurogamer and Video Games Chronicle all suggesting that Switch 2 apparently has been internally delayed or pushed back to early 2025. This may change things somewhat in terms of what we should expect. If Metroid Prime 4 is meant to be a part of the launch window of Switch 2, well then, it wouldn't be coming out this year, would it? Which is why the most recent information from Jeff Grubb makes things a bit more of a head-scratcher. So last week we talked about how Jeff Grubb had heard that there's supposed to be this big marketing campaign that's supposed to kick off in May for Metroid. And I already talked about in my video about all these recent Switch 2 internal delay reports, how this might just be a scenario where Jeff Grubb, who says during that same little bit that this could be outdated information and may have changed, and considering that the recent reports seem to be very fresh in terms of this internal delay, it may be the case that Metroid Prime 4 won't be happening in May. Even if it's not related to Switch 2, if it's outdated information, there is a strong chance plans could have changed. However, this week, during a show where they were watching the partner showcase, Jeff Grubb mentioned during the Epic Mickey segment that because Epic Mickey has proven true, his source that told him about Epic Mickey in this type of remake also had told him about Metroid Prime 4. And so he feels more confident about his source here. And the basic story is that Metroid Prime 4 will be coming out in 2024. So then, what's going on here? Does this mean that Metroid Prime 4 is coming out 2024? It is one of Nintendo's big titles for this year? And if so, does that mean that the reports of Switch 2 this year are wrong? Or does it mean that the reports of Switch 2 are still correct and it's still early 2025, but Metroid Prime 4 is coming out beforehand, and they're not going to do some sort of cross-gen simultaneous release for Switch 1 and Switch 2. What's the deal? Well, something else that I think should be added here is that Dr. Serkan Toto, after these reports, said Nintendo is likely looking at a pretty dry pipeline for this year. There's been a lot of talk from a lot of these different places that 2024 isn't looking to be a great year for Nintendo. But I guess you could argue that what do they define as a pretty dry pipeline, and also could they be wrong? On the second point, I'll say that yes, they can be wrong because they've been wrong in the past, multiple times. I think usually when these reports come out and these people say these things, it's rooted in truth, but because these are things that are subject to change and there's room for misinterpretation, we should still be taking these things with a grain of salt. For example, while a lot of these insiders have heard from several different developers that they've been told to gear up their games for an early 2025 launch of Switch 2, there have been some developers, at least according to Nash Weedle, that haven't heard this memo yet. Does that mean that Switch 2 is somehow coming out in holiday 2024? I would hope, but I'm going to assume no until we have some compelling information, because the reports from all these credible places is just too significant at this point. Although nothing is certain until confirmed by Nintendo. But going back to this potential subjective line of Nintendo's likely looking at a pretty dry pipeline for this year, we had heard something similar from both Andy Robinson and Christopher Dring after Tears of the Kingdom came out. So Andy Robinson said this: "From what I'm hearing, I wouldn't be surprised if Nintendo starts talking about new hardware by 2024. I'm not convinced another huge first-party game other than Zelda is left on Switch." And then from Christopher Dring, "No, I didn't mean literally nothing. I have heard that after Zelda, Nintendo doesn't have a significant game for quite some time." And what's funny about this is that we got Super Mario Bros. Wonder 5 months after the release for Tears of the Kingdom. From a sales perspective, it's a pretty big deal. From a critical acclaim perspective, it's a pretty big deal. Could you argue that because it's a 2D side-scrolling game that it's not that big of a deal? Okay. But then, what will we say about Metroid Prime 4? If you want to argue that the Metroid series doesn't have strong sales, that does have merit. If you want to argue that you somehow doubt that despite the very good track record of Retro Studios releasing high-quality games, and also Nintendo themselves, that somehow Metroid Prime 4 might be not expected to have a high critical acclaim, you can argue that, I guess. But there's no denying the fact that Metroid Prime 4 has been in development for a very long time, and is considered to be something Nintendo's put a lot of money and time into. And so, if Mario Wonder is not considered a big game, and Metroid Prime 4 is not considered a big game, what would be? So what I'm getting at here is that we've heard things from some of these credible places and people, and I absolutely believe they're credible. This is not me throwing any shade towards them, just for the record. I just think that there's definitely a lot of room left for interpretation with what we're hearing here. I mean, if Andy Robinson said he's not convinced there's another huge first-party game after Zelda, and then we get Mario Wonder, this being the same person as writing articles about Switch 2 coming out in 2024, and then later hearing about delays coming in 2025, this is things that they are hearing from their sources. And so, maybe there's just confusion on what's going on. Maybe what their sources are hearing is not extremely clear because Nintendo isn't extremely clear, and a lot of things are changing. I think it's honestly tough to say what is going to happen. I think it's a toss-up. Maybe Metroid Prime 4 is a big game. Maybe Nintendo is saving it as a 2024 release. But Switch 2 is indeed coming out next year instead. To me, that would be a bit of a head-scratcher because Metroid Prime 4, with how much time and effort Nintendo's put into it, you would think they would want to have a cross-gen version ready. And you would think that the cross-gen version you'd want coming out around the time of the original version. I mean, just look at how Nintendo handled Twilight Princess and Breath of the Wild. Twilight Princess came out a few weeks before the GameCube version. Typically, the cross-gen version, the more enhanced version for a new console, comes out first or at least at the same time. And so, if we get Metroid Prime 4 this year to help bolster this supposed dry lineup for 2024, are we foregoing a cross-gen version for Switch 2? Or are they going to release simply an enhanced version later down the road? I don't like the idea of having to wait for an enhanced version after I've already played Metroid Prime 4. I would prefer to play the game in its best form possible, but that's just my own personal taste. I think regardless of what form we see Metroid Prime 4 come in, be it for Switch 2 or Switch 1, it's going to be a spectacular release. But I'm also a bit cautious about assuming these rumors about Prime 4 coming out this year, because a lot of this info could be outdated, because a few weeks ago all these sources thought Switch 2 was definitely happening in 2024, and now most of them doubt it. And if a lot of these people are also saying they're expecting a dry year from Nintendo, well, if we have Metroid Prime 4, does that count as dry? Maybe they're sleeping on Prime 4. That could be. To close things out here, this is how I'm going to leave things off in terms of explaining what I'm thinking right now. What I'm thinking right now is that we don't know what's going to happen. Maybe Prime 4 is coming out this year, maybe it's not. Maybe it's being saved for Switch 2, maybe it's not. Maybe Switch 2 is coming out early 2025, maybe it's not. Although most people think it is coming out next year. It's just uncertain. But what I do feel a confidence in is this. I think we're seeing Metroid Prime 4 this year. I think we'll finally start getting details about this game, we'll start learning about it, and we can at least start talking about it and analyzing those trailers and having fun discussions about this game. Very much in the way we had fun discussions about Tears of the Kingdom in the months leading up to its release. And to me, that is part of the experience, the build up and hype leading into a big, awesome release from Nintendo. And in the meanwhile, I don't think it's unreasonable to expect that maybe we'll see a Metroid Prime 2 and Prime 3 remastered to some extent at some point this year. So no matter how things are truly going to be shaking out, I think the Metroid conversation this year is going to have a bit more of a pulse. And it's going to be a good time, but we just have to be just a little bit more patient. Our time is coming. But what do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.